Hello, my name is W.J. Sheehan. I am the author of a series of books entitled Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. This series is a compilation of sightings, encounters, and evidential findings pertaining to Bigfoot in North America. The series is available in both paperback and ebook formats by going to www.buybigfootbooks.com, and the link will take you where you want to go. Both now as well as going into the future, I will be reading various chapters from the series and posting them for your listening pleasure. If you have seen something, say something. I can be contacted at splinters@optonline.net. That's SPLINTERS at optonline.net. Today's reading is entitled The Fifth Bullet, and it comes from Book 6 in the series, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. I hope you enjoy it. The following account was told to me by Edward Seuss, a resident of the state of Oregon. Here is what Edward encountered when hunting in northern Oregon in the fall of 2003. As I told you when we first spoke, Bill, I was hunting solo on October 1st in 2003, working my way up through the Willamette National Forest and nearing the fringes of the Three Sisters Wilderness. I was breaking out of some fairly heavy timber and coming into an area where I was faced with low mountainous terrain on three sides. To my northeast, there was a very distinct ridgeline sloping down from a peak that was in view directly in front of me. As I was making my way through the timber and it was beginning to thin out, I noticed what appeared at first to be a pile of branches heaped up between several large trees. It appeared to be shaped like a dome, being about 12 feet tall or so. This was an extremely unusual thing to run across, and I had never seen anything like it in all my days hunting. So quite naturally, I went over to investigate it more closely. Nearing this structure, it very much resembled a roughly built Quonset hut, and it had a large opening in one side of it. Immediately, I could tell that this structure had been assembled and did not occur randomly by some act of nature. First of all, the nature of the forest, which was predominantly large pines in this area, did not lend itself to a large quantity of fallen branches being on the ground, and in particular a pile of branches falling together to form a 12-foot tall heap below the trees. Looking through the opening, which was about 6 feet tall and some 4 feet wide, I could now see other tree boughs which were laid out covering the entire interior of the hut about 2 feet deep. And there were more than a few animal bones scattered about the interior. I have to tell you that I was more than a little bit puzzled by what I was seeing. My initial thought being that some hunter or hunters had gone to quite a bit of trouble to put this together as a shelter when in the area. But that thought was trumped by that of the bones inside. It's not as though there were cavemen living here gnawing on dinosaur legs in the confines of their hut. I stepped back, withdrawing my head from the inside of the hut, when, for whatever reason, I felt as though I was being watched. Call it intuition or sixth sense or whatever you want. I felt like a pair of eyes were burning a hole through my flesh. I was hunting that day with a vintage M1 carbine with a clip. As this feeling of being watched was now overwhelming my senses, I started to scan the surrounding area, when my eyes were drawn to something dark on the ridgeline, which I told you about earlier. Whatever this was that I was now seeing was not on the ridge earlier. The distance was far too great to estimate how tall or what it was, but in my estimation at the time, it was certainly something standing upright and all in black. My first thought was that of a hunter dressed in dark clothing who happened to be walking on the ridge and noticed me below, stopping to have a look at his fellow hunter. But this was about to change, and change dramatically. Suddenly, and without warning, this man, or whatever it was, broke from its position on the ridge and began running down the slope, heading in my direction. Now this ridge had to have been several thousand feet in elevation, and was fairly clear of any brush or trees, and exactly how far away it was from my position was an undetermined quantity. I realized within the first 15 seconds or so that there was absolutely no way this was a man. I say this because of the amount of ground that was being covered and how quickly, as it was now running down the slope. In 30 seconds' time, it must have descended 1,000 feet and was closing rapidly. I was now fully aware that this was not and could not be a man. If I was to descend this same slope, I would have to do so slowly and cautiously, and it would more than likely take me a half hour or more. Within about 90 seconds, this creature, which I was now convinced was a Sasquatch, was now at the base of the mountain and running straight at me. At the time, I had estimated the distance to be between 600 and 900 yards between myself and the mountain's base. I had no scope on my gun, and this thing was now coming straight towards me like a freight train. I had an 8-round clip in my rifle, and I lowered the gun, pointing it above the head of the oncoming beast, squeezing off my first round. The shot rang out with a loud blast echoing against the mountains, and the beast kept coming. It was close enough now where I could see the movements of the arms. Do you remember the scene in the Terminator movie when the cop was chasing the car, or whatever it was, and he was running with arms pumping at an incredible and unrelenting pace? This is exactly what I was seeing. I now knew that if I didn't kill this thing, that I was a dead man. Putting the sight right on him, I squeezed off rounds 2 and 3, and he kept coming. I couldn't believe what was happening, and I began to tremble violently. I had 5 rounds left, being sure that I had hit him with the last 2, which had no effect whatsoever. He kept running. I leaned against a tree, steadying my shaking hands and gun, and squeezed off round 4, and nothing. He was now at maybe only 100 yards, and in the moment I could now make out the details of his body. And as I pulled the trigger on bullet number 5, he dropped to the ground. I took the opportunity to quickly reload as the beast lay unmoving out before me. Having done so, I slowly began approaching the monster with my gun mounted and pointed directly at it. I was stalking it like a Marine approaching an enemy foxhole, expecting it to rise to its feet at any moment and resume its attack. When I was within about 100 feet, I put 2 more rounds into it and finished the job. When I came to within about 20 feet of the monster, it was unmoving and very much dead, and I fell to my knees. Both physically and mentally, I felt as though I had just finished a marathon, my body being completely drained of energy, and tears started to roll down my cheeks. For what reason, I do not know. As it now lay before me, the Sasquatch was all of 10 feet long and possibly 1,500 pounds or greater. Its fur was soaked in blood, and there was blood running out of its mouth. How it could have kept such a pace, having been hit so many times, is beyond belief. I was quite sure that 3 of the rounds had hit it in the chest, with the 5th bullet finishing the job. If I had brought my bolt action that day, I don't believe that I would be alive to tell this tale. This hut that I had run across had obviously belonged to this creature, and it was none too happy about my being there. The way it was running to me appeared as though it was on a kill and destroy mission, and I wasn't going to waste any time waiting to be on the receiving end of its wrath. Being somewhat afraid at the time of potential repercussions for my actions that day, I left the beast right where it had dropped and retreated back out of the woods. I wasn't about to wait around for the immediate family to arrive with vengeance on its mind. The beast, as it lay before me, was covered in dark brown hair. Its face did not look human or like that of a monkey. It simply looked like that of a Sasquatch. To me, it is not a hybrid anything. It is its own entity, being completely and solely what it is, and nothing else. At any rate, that is what I both saw and shot that day in the Oregon wilderness. Thank you for listening.